Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this Tuesday afternoon is Shawn, Cruz, manager of trader services at TD Ameritrade, to discuss Nasdaq-100 levels on what's a shortened holiday Thanksgiving week. Shawn, it's great to see you, and let's walk through some of those levels that you're looking at.
Yeah, so one thing to note is that you're starting to see is that the cyclicals finally starting to catch up some pretty strong performance as of late. But we were always wondering if that would maybe come at the expense of maybe some of these large growth names that are in the Nasdaq 100 that have had incredible rallies so far this year. And we're actually getting confirmation now that that's not the case. And I sort of expected that just with all the funds that are sort of sitting on the sideline. I didn't think you needed some money to come out of the growth tech pile to go into the cyclicals. I thought there was plenty that could come in and would just generally push things higher. And that's what we're seeing today. So you are seeing some breakouts on some of the other indices. I do think it's going to be interesting to see what the NASDAQ does here. If we continue to see a grind higher out of the NASDAQ, then you can see it really start pushing up towards some of those highs that we've seen earlier this year. I do look at vol Q, and that's one thing I'm tracking. And as long as you're starting to see that vol Q, which sort of tracks the uncertainty around the NASDAQ 100, it continues to fall off. And I think that is sort of indicative that there is a growing level of comfort with continuing to move into these names. And I think that bodes well for upside here in the future.
Yeah, it was interesting even yesterday with the Nasdaq 100 weaker, vol Q was also down as well. So that's a great point that you make. Let's talk about retail. We know that's going to be big going into Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and of course, the final stretch of the holiday season.
Yeah, and I wanted to just sort of look at the various retailers out there that are some of the larger names, and I didn't just look at, say, Nordstrom versus Macy's or Walmart versus Target. I wanted to sort of take a look at the retail sector across the space. And right now, I really get the sense that you're looking at names like Nordstrom and Macy's as maybe being a little bit more of a cyclical type of a retail trade, whereas Target and Walmart have actually had some of those sort of defensive qualities, almost like a staple, just because people were actually going to Walmart, to Target to get those staple goods. And I think a huge piece of that was them being able to figure out digital. I think right now you're seeing a lot of these other retailers try and sort of rebalance their operating models to see if they can find ways to tighten up expenses and actually improve some profitability and cash flow. But going into this shopping season here, it's not just a big thing for a lot of these retailers that are already out there, but even thinking of Amazon, they even sort of, by virtue of the guidance they put out, acknowledge there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot that we're going to have to wait and see how the consumer is feeling as we get closer to holiday shopping season before we have a feel for how it'll go. Because Amazon even said, look, it could be $1 billion to $5 billion. That's quite the range, but I think it just shows the amount of uncertainty there is around the consumer. And I think a lot of it has to do with stimulus efforts, extension of unemployment benefits. If they feel like there's going to be a cliff that they're going to fall off here fiscally at the end of the year, they're not going to go out and spend a lot of money on trinkets and gadgets for Christmas. So that's why I think it's going to be very important for a lot of these retailers, what happens with stimulus as we get closer to the holiday shopping season.
Yeah, Shawn, that's a great point that you bring up, because I'm curious to know if in the prior quarter they had the expectation of stimulus coming through and that was modeled in to what their guidance was. So it's really interesting that you brought that up, because of course we're not going to get that anytime soon. Let's wrap up and talk about Tesla. Quite the story here.
It's incredible to see the moves they're able to do. And if you think about it, now that they're just north of 500 billion for market cap, it's actually quite incredible to see how far they come. They were sitting at about 100 billion in market cap just January. So some amazing returns. And I think what sort of provided this last leg higher was getting included into some of the other indexes. I think it's interesting to see what that actually does from an investor behavior standpoint. If maybe people start to think, well, if it's getting included more indices, it'll get picked up in tracking portfolios, so maybe I don't need to go out there and own the shares. Or some people who just want that single exposure to Tesla, because you're never sure of people trying to call the top in Tesla, and they very frequently end up not being right, at least for the short term. And you're seeing that here again. And I actually am interested to watch that 500 level I mean, it just those psychological levels, they do actually mean something as far as people are concerned. So I almost want to see if that 500 price level is going to serve as a floor here moving forward. Because if you look at the volume profiles here, we're sort of in rarefied air as far as volume. So when that is the case, you sort of just really have to look at some of those price levels that it was able to skyrocket higher out of, and see if those can serve as support moving forward.
Yeah, I would imagine the folks over at S&P wish that they had Tesla in before that $400 billion market cap move for sure. With the index, Shawn, thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.